In 1932, at the height of the Great Depression, a family of 5 sat around an empty table, with nothing but a single pot. No meat, no bread, just water, and whatever scraps they could find. The mother stirred slowly, stretching that meal to last not just 1 night, but 3. And somehow, they survived. During the Great Depression, millions of families lived like this, forced to create meals out of almost nothing. Simple, cheap, forgotten. But these weren't just desperate recipes. Some of them were so effective, they kept entire families alive for weeks. And today, most people have never even heard of them. These are the forgotten meals that kept Americans alive. For many families during the Great Depression, survival didn't start with finding food. It started with stretching what little they already had. Imagine waking up, knowing that the only thing left in your home is a single pot from yesterday. Inside it, a thin mixture of water, a few vegetable scraps, maybe a bone, if you were lucky. For most people today, this wouldn't even count as a meal. But back then, this was everything. Mothers would stand over the stove, slowly stirring the pot, not to cook something new, but to make it last. A little more water would be added, just enough to fill another bowl, then another and another, until what started as a small meal became something that could feed an entire family. Day by day, the soup would grow thinner, the flavor almost gone, the nutrients barely there. But that didn't matter, because in a time like this, the goal wasn't to eat well, it was to not starve. Children would sit quietly, holding their bowls, knowing this might be all they get for the day. And parents often ate last, or sometimes not at all. This kind of meal had a name in many homes, but no matter what it was called, it meant the same thing: survival. Because when there's nothing left to cook, you don't make new food. You make the old food last. But for many families, as the months went on, the little food families had began to disappear. Pantries emptied, markets became too expensive, and for many, even a thin pot of soup was no longer possible. So people started looking beyond what they once considered food. Backyards, fields, empty lots, places they had ignored before, suddenly became sources of survival. Dandelions, once pulled out and thrown away, were now carefully picked by hand. The leaves are boiled into a bitter meal. The roots, sometimes roasted, as a substitute for coffee. It didn't taste good. In fact, most of it was hard to eat. But taste didn't matter anymore. Because when your body is starving, your standards change. Some families would walk 4 miles, searching for anything edible: wild greens, small plants, even things they weren't completely sure were safe, because doing nothing meant going hungry. And sometimes, survival meant swallowing more than just food. It meant swallowing pride. People who once lived comfortably now found themselves collecting scraps, taking what others left behind, or accepting whatever they could get, no matter how little. Meals became unpredictable. One day, you might find enough to eat. The next, nothing at all. But even in that uncertainty, people adapted. They learned what plants could be eaten, what could be stretched, and what could keep them going just a little longer. Because in a world where food was no longer guaranteed, knowledge became survival, and sometimes they had to get even more creative. But survival during the Great Depression wasn't just about finding food. It was about making sure that when you did eat, it would actually last. Because for many families, eating once wasn't the problem. It was the long hours after, when hunger came back. So people began to rely on one thing above all else: foods that could fill the stomach for as long as possible. Potatoes became one of the most important staples. Cheap, easy to cook, and most importantly, heavy. A single potato could make you feel full, even if it didn't give you everything your body needed. Flour was another lifeline. With just water, sometimes a bit of salt, families could create something out of almost nothing: flatbreads, dense, simple, cooked on whatever surface was available. No yeast, no softness, just enough to chew, and enough to silence hunger. Cornmeal was used the same way, turned into porridge, or small, firm cakes, meals that weren't meant to taste good, but to stay in your stomach as long as possible. Because during this time, feeling full was everything, even if the meal lacked nutrients, even if it was repetitive, day after day. That heavy feeling in the stomach meant you could keep going. Work, searching, surviving, all required energy. And these simple foods provided just enough. It wasn't balanced, it wasn't healthy, but it was effective. And for families trying to survive, that was all that mattered. But eventually, even these simple meals had to change. Because feeding one person was one thing. Feeding an entire family was something else entirely. But surviving alone was never the real challenge. The real challenge was making sure everyone else survived too. Because during the Great Depression, hunger was rarely experienced alone. It was shared. Families didn't just think about their own plate. They thought about how to divide what little they had, so that no one would be left with nothing. Meals became something different, not personal, but collective. One pot placed at the center of the table, carefully portioned, every serving measured without tools, only by instinct and fairness. Thick stews became more valuable than anything else, because unlike other meals, they could be stretched and shared. A handful of ingredients turned into something that could feed 5, sometimes more, not because there was enough, but because it had to be enough. Parents would often take less, quietly giving more to their children, pretending they weren't hungry, just to make sure the others didn't feel it as much. And no one would say it out loud, but everyone understood. Because in moments like these, food wasn't just about survival anymore. It became sacrifice. It became love, measured in portions. Even the smallest meal could carry meaning far beyond its size. And somehow, these shared moments kept families together, even when everything else was falling apart. Because when there's nothing left, and the world feels uncertain, sometimes the only thing you can hold on to is each other. But survival didn't end at the table. Because even when the body was fed, something else still needed to endure. Because in the end, survival during the Great Depression wasn't just about feeding the body. It was about holding on. When everything else was falling apart, days became uncertain. Work was never guaranteed, and no one knew when things would get better. But even in the middle of that uncertainty, families held on to something simple, routine, the act of sitting down together. Even if the meal was small, even if it wasn't enough, it gave structure to a life that had lost control. A thin soup, shared at the same time each day. A small piece of bread, divided the same way. These weren't just habits, they were anchors, something to remind them that they made it through another day. And sometimes, that was enough to keep going. Because when everything feels uncertain, even the smallest sense of normal can feel like stability. The meals were simple, often repetitive, sometimes not even satisfying. But they carried something more important than nutrition. They carried hope. Hope that tomorrow might be different. Hope that this struggle wouldn't last forever. And hope that somehow they would make it through. These meals were never meant to be remembered. They weren't created to impress or to be written in cookbooks. They were created out of necessity, built from whatever was available, and stretched far beyond what they were meant to be. And yet, they saved millions. Not because they were perfect, but because they were enough. Today, food is everywhere. Choices are endless, and survival rarely looks like this anymore. But maybe there's something we've forgotten, because these meals weren't just about food. They were about resilience, sacrifice, and finding a way to keep going, even when there was nothing left. And maybe That's what made them unforgettable. If you want more stories like this, subscribe.